Hello, 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 and welcome. If you are looking for the Brandon Hall Group 5 app webinar, Eliminating the Noise, you are in the right place. And give folks just a minute to make their way into our session today. While we're doing that, take a minute to familiarize yourself with that Zoom interface, which we all know pretty well. We've come to know it well over the last few years. Find that chat window and let us know where you're joining us from. I am in sunny and cool South Florida. Asheville. Love Asheville. One of my favorite places. California. Picking up a lot of the US crowd today. Oh, Costa Rica, Catherine, welcome. Steve, you guys might be the only ones from the UK so far.
Flying the flag, flying the flag.
Toronto, Canada. Oh, there we go. Andrew from London is on. Excellent. Oh, there we go. There's your UK folks. Duncan from Kent. A couple of Californians joining us. Good morning to you, West Coast USers. It's midday where I am, and it's the end of the workday where Steve and his neighbors are.
Yeah, it's nice and dark outside. Very joyful.
Awesome. All right. I think we will go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to Eliminating the Noise Strategies for Effective Learning in a Distracted World. I'm Matt Pittman, I'm Principal Analyst with the Brandon Hall Group, and it's my privilege to be your host this afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And I'm excited to have with me Steve Thompson, Chief Learning Officer from 5app. Steve is an award-winning people leader with 28 years of experience in learning, talent, and organizational development. Now as CLO at 5app, he specializes in using learning technologies to align business and people strategies that foster learning cultures that maximize business outcomes. Hello, Steve.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us. And we do want to thank 5app for sponsoring today's webinar. 5app believes that making content available to your learners should be easy, but rarely is it. 5app addresses this by bypassing needless complexity to deliver the right content to the right people at the right time in an easy and engaging learning platform. The result is rapid knowledge transfer with minimal effort. They are headquartered in London and serve customers across the globe. So for more information, we do encourage you to visit them at 5app.com. Thank you guys so much for sponsoring. And if you aren't familiar with the work that we do at Brandon Hall Group, we work with organizations in a variety of ways to inspire and encourage excellence in your HR and HCM practices. We do that in our membership programs, our preferred provider program for technology providers, as well as our excellence awards. And we have some certification programs both for individuals and for organizations. And we sponsor our annual HCM Excellence Conference, which is coming up in just another week and a half in West Palm Beach, Florida. I believe there is still space available, so check that out at our website as well. At the heart of the work that we do is our research, and we rely on your participation in those surveys to help us understand what's happening with various HCM related topics throughout the year And we run these surveys periodically all year long and then publish that research in a variety of ways. You're going to be exposed to some of it today in today's session. You can always find our open surveys on our website at brandonhall.com and just click surveys. And be on the lookout. We will be launching our 2024 Learning and Development Benchmarking Study within the next few weeks, probably right after the conference. And finally, just a few logistics. You've already found the chat feature and you know it well. Thank you for that. There is also a Q&A panel, which is open and available to you as we go through. If you have a question for Steve or I as we talk through today's topic, feel free to make use of that Q&A panel and we will respond to questions as we go through. Also, just to remind you, do not worry about trying to get the exact right note or the exact right quote or capture that screen grab of the slide. Everyone who is registered for today's event will receive a link to the recording as well as a copy of the presentation materials. So you will get all of those in your email within a couple of hours of us wrapping up today. And with that, I think we are ready to jump in. And I'm excited about this conversation because I think that learning is poised to become even more critical to businesses in 2024 than even we could have imagined it being so. But what's happening is there's so much attention and focus that's being paid that it's become quite challenging as learning professionals and leaders to figure out how to navigate through all of that and find the right strategy at the right time. And we know this because we recently conducted our 2024 HCM Outlook study, and we asked participants and respondents to indicate the level of investment in learning and development initiatives that were planned in 2024. And that's what you see on this chart. Now, there's a lot of information on this chart. If I were you, I'd wait till I got my file in the email and then I can dig into the detail. What I want you to understand about this is as you go in the three blue columns, there's a small investment, a moderate investment, and a heavy investment. And then you've got 2024 on the left and 2023 data on the right. And what you can take from this is that almost everything is increasing in investment, which means companies are paying more attention and they're raising the bar of expectation on what they need their learning and development teams to deliver. Steve, how does that line up with what you're hearing from your colleagues and customers?
Yeah, I mean, there's perfect alignment. I think there's also an air of caution that comes along with that. You know, with a raised investment, obviously comes the expectation, and I think it really does call out that almost need to revisit how we align to the business, how we talk to the business, the language that we use in terms of demonstrating not only our value, but in terms of, you know, these component parts that we're going to be investing in, you know, how do we really demonstrate that they are making a return on the investment? I think it's interesting as well, if we think about from the technology piece, obviously they all align with upskilling, reskilling, a very hot topic currently, but particularly from the technology side of things, is reflecting back and thinking about the learning cultures that we currently have, whether they be self-created or cultures we've inherited, and posing the question as an overlay to this slide, which is that culture fit for purpose to drive and house the investment that's going to go into these various initiatives and components.
Absolutely. We're going to get a little bit deeper into that in just a minute. And from a more broad perspective, that last slide was very specific to learning and development. And the question is really in terms of time, money, and resources, what level of investment are you expecting? And then on a broader scale, we just sort of said, people strategies, where are you focused on people strategies? And what I want you to take from this slide is everywhere you see a gold star is a learning connection. Now, you can obviously make the argument that learning underlies all of these priorities, but those are very specific to uh, impact points and connecting points for us. So there's even more noise that comes into the conversation. And then one of my favorite data points, because I lived it, in our voice of the customer survey that we ran last year, how many LMSs are in your organization? And what we learned is that 38%, more than a third of respondents, have more than one LMS in their organization. And as Steve and as I told you, I came from an organization where I was responsible for managing 4 LMSs for 20,000 users all across the continental US. So it adds to the complexity. So what we want to know from you in the audience is, where does the noise come from in your world and work? Where are you feeling the pressure that as we head into this new year? Is it along the same lines as what we've seen with upskilling and career development and learner experience or employee experience? Is it something else? So if you'll just pop your answer to this question, where is that noise coming from for you, into the chat? And Steve, what are some of the other places that we know that noise is coming from?
It's plentiful. Noise comes from every single direction, because I think it's very easy to look at it through the learning lens, and all those various initiatives, growing technology, the pace of growth in that space. That's all great, but I think there's also that other lens to consider and look through, which is what do our employees, our team members, co-workers experience every single day. And you've got emails on top of that, team chats, growing expectations and volume of work. So all of these components manifest in this noise. So from a learning perspective, when we're looking to really drive through, whether it be a program or a piece of learning or content, how do you navigate that? How do you make sure that your piece of learning marketing or your initiative is seen? How do you gain visibility? So
Yeah.
it's
And
plentiful.
we've got great feedback coming through, things like future proofing the skills. Lots of people talking about AI, but not understanding it. Simplifying the learner experience, improving skills with less time, less people, less people to guide and teach. There's that upskilling and reskilling, the reimagining performance management, unclear organizational and departmental goals. We're definitely going to touch on that one, aren't we, Steve? And then manager
Oh, yes.
feedback and direct report engagement. And it's all very urgent, according to Cindy. And I think that's very, very
Mm.
true. And we talked a little, you mentioned this already, where that's where the culture of the organization and the learning culture specifically begins to be very important. So we asked you as you registered for the webinar to give us your thoughts on that. Does your current learning culture empower people to take charge of their own development, which can help kind of manage through that? And as you might expect, Steve, it's a little bit of a normal curve where most of our folks are doing that to some extent. A very few are doing it, are not really doing it at this point, and about a fourth, a little bit more than a fourth, are very much uh, have protecting a learning culture that empowers people to take charge of their development. Why is that so important, do you think?
Well, I think it's recognizing from the previous slide. You've got the bell curve at the top end. You've got some organizations that they're getting it right, but I think again there's a consideration here of two component parts, which is around maturity, which is around organizational maturity, and maturity of the learning function and everything that goes along with that. You've got some key areas here around continuous learning, safe experimentation, leadership buy-in, so on and so forth. I think what really resonates for me out of these options, if you like, these component parts, is that leadership buy-in. But it's not only the leadership buying into what it is that we're presenting as a learning strategy, but it's how are they role modeling? how are they themselves creating and fostering the environment that teams can go out and they can experiment? That how are leaders demonstrating that they are continuous learners, and how does that permeate down the various functions, divisions, and teams? And I think that experimentation component is so relevant right now. I think someone may have called it out in the chat around a lot of talk and a lot of noise about AI, but limited understanding. That understanding will come through, obviously, with knowledge, but also being able to experiment and being encouraged to experiment. So some key component parts here. But one final point just on this. You see many posts I see on LinkedIn, top 3 things you must do to create a learning culture. Let's be honest here, that there's no magic bullet. And this isn't something that you can turn up on a Monday and then by Friday do these 3 points, you've got your learning culture. This is turning the oil tanker, but it starts with that vision. It starts with where do we need to go and what does it, the purpose that it needs to be doing.
Absolutely. So when you think about learning culture in your own organizations, we would like to know which of these elements do you find is the strongest in your organization today. So my colleague Melissa is going to open a poll question right now. We're going to give folks just a second to respond to this. Which element, the continuous learning, the safe experimentation, the leadership buy-in, the organization-wide collaboration, the adaptability and resilience, or if you're not sure, or you don't know, or you don't have an opinion, that option is there for you as well. What's strongest in your own organization? And Steve, I'm looking at this list thinking we could do 1 hour on each of these, couldn't
Oh,
we?
easily. Easily. And probably another 10 points on top of that. Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yep. All right, let's take a look at where are we strongest in. All right. And so it looks like pretty evenly split between continuous learning and leadership buy-in. And then right behind that, the adaptability and resilience. And I think that bodes well for organizations from my perspective. Steve, thoughts before we move on to the flip side of that coin?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's encouraging, certainly from the continuous learning component part, because it's integral to the learning culture you're looking to create. Leadership buy-in as well. Encouraging. Let's not again mince words here. They're not huge percentages, but pulling out those 2 component parts is encouraging.
Absolutely. So now we're going to flip the coin and we want to know which of those elements would you consider to be weakest. And again, what we are starting here because it's foundational to building those effective learning strategies is you need to understand well the learning culture of the organization, where it will help you and what you need to work on. And that's a great call out, Cindy, that continuous learning is pushed strongly, but not actually supported with systemic structures. I've definitely seen that in my time as well.
Yeah, that's a great point.
All right. And with that, let's take a look. Organization-wide collaboration, far and away the weakest link, as well as leadership buy-in. And I love that happened, Steve, because leadership buy-in is at once strong and at once weak and it all depends on where you are and how your leaders engage, right?
And it is critical. I mean, go back to the previous slide around investment. That investment is typically going to be coming from or signed off at a C-suite level. So really being able to define what your learning strategy proposition is, tying that back to organizational priorities and strategy is critical. So getting the whole leadership buy-in, it works at a number of levels. Certainly from a learning leader's perspective, to buy into the proposition, to invest in it, but also then to role model, as I was saying, to be an advocate, because it really does set the tone.
Absolutely. So we asked you a couple of other questions on the registration process. And so one of those was, what data are you tracking to prove learning's business impact? And again, this can become, in my experience, quite a source of noise for a learning leader. And what we see here are the things we would expect to see: learning completions, business outcomes linked to learning, learner satisfaction at 71%, um, pre and post assessments, manager feedback, and then a small percentage of other pieces are making up that balance. So I don't know about you, Steve, but I look at that and go, learning completions, learner satisfaction, and pre and post assessments. I would expect those to be at the top of the list.
Absolutely, and I think that there's a lot of a lot to be said, in terms of evaluating and getting to that point of business impact. But again, I would overlay this maturity piece, and when I come on and share the case study around Greystar, it's really relevant, because learning completion, satisfaction, have been termed, and maybe rightly termed, as vanity metrics, because the other way to think about it, it's demonstrating engagement, but not necessarily impact. Way of thinking about it, if you go and watch a stand-up comic, you're going to be incredibly engaged with the act, and will laugh. An hour later, try and recall, one of the gags, what one of the jokes. So the engagement, does it necessarily translate to business impact? Not always. Is there a space for tracking and presenting those as metrics? Absolutely.
Yeah. And just very quickly, because we identified them as priorities and things that are creating noise for us, we also asked about learner experience and how you would rate it, and we've pretty got a pretty good handle on it, at least in this group, mostly effective to somewhat effective on learner experience. And then the last one: to what extent are you leveraging the full capability of your current learning technology? And I know that you and I talked about this one a little bit prior, Steve, about how it's about half of our folks feel like they're leveraging the about half of the capability of their learning technology, and only about a fourth are feel like they're leveraging a lot of their full capability. I really worded that question weird. Like, it's hard to talk about because of the way I worded the question. We will need to fix
But
that. But any thoughts
I,
about that
yeah,
component and how it adds to the noise, real quick?
I think it is a real contributor, in terms of the noise. So if we think about noise as things that prevent people accessing the learning, or the content that they need, and quite often, and we hear about it, if you look in the land of learning technology providers, a lot of it is about functionality. It can do this, it can do that, it can do everything. It can make a cup of tea, or whatever it may be. But is functionality king? I have a question around that, purely from my experience, because the other way to take the comparison, you kind of need your learning technology to do what it says on the tin. If you look at interfaces from GBT, Bard, Claude, so on and so forth, they're so basic. It does what it needs to do. So, is there a question here, or maybe a challenge, that our learning technology, incredibly powerful, but maybe there's too much functionality, or lack of education in terms of how to leverage that?
I absolutely agree with that. And, I came from a role where I was directly responsible for the learning technology, and I inherited a great deal of it. It wasn't, I wasn't part of the selection process or the implementation, but I inherited it and was told to make it work. And every day I would find something else, some other capability we weren't using or that we were using incorrectly, and trying to right the tanker, as you say, was monumentally challenging. And then things that we didn't even know that the technology was capable of doing or that we had
Right.
access to. So taking that time to invest in understanding can make a big difference. And so, really, the bottom line of all of this is there's a lot going on, and there's a lot expected of us as learning leaders and learning professionals. And so, Steve, you're going to tell us a story about how to cut through all of this noise. So, I'm going to turn it over to you and take it away.
Thanks, Matt. And if everybody is sitting comfortably, I will begin. Could we spin over to the next slide, if that's okay? Thank you. So I'll dive straight in and I'll answer the first question that may be on everybody's mind as you look at the slide, which is we're talking about Greystar. What is Greystar? Well, my previous life before I joined 5app, I was a senior director of learning for Greystar, who are a global real estate organization. And they focus around investment, raising investment, finding land, developing land, building on that land in terms of build to rent, and then managing that property. So headquartered in the US, very large presence in the US. So our US attendees may be familiar. Set up an office and an operation in the UK and across Europe in 2013. And I joined the Greystar journey in 2018. So my remit coming into Greystar was effectively to build a learning function from scratch. So it was one of those golden egg moments in learning and development where you've got an opportunity to build from scratch, and moving into that role to then discover it really was a blank piece of paper. So all the challenges that we recognize around taking on such an undertaking existed. There was obviously no learning culture, there was no content, there was no platform. There was myself and one other who was delivering health and safety training. Other than that, that was it. So the challenge was on, of which I'm always up for. So how did we approach that? Straight into a robust deep dive learning needs analysis to really understand, okay, where are those performance gaps? Where are those skill gaps? What's good? What's not? Where's the strength? Where is the scope? What did stand out very strongly, because it was a rapidly growing organization and continues to be, there was a lot of people finding themselves in senior positions but hadn't had the experience of leading teams. So they had broad and very large teams, but not necessarily the capability to manage or lead to their maximum effectiveness. There's a lot of links back in terms of what we've looked at before in terms of that learning culture. And again, the importance of having leaders that can demonstrate that. So there was a challenge there. So recognizing that this is a ground upward build, and we're on a journey. What was really important for me was to really start to think about the vision and the strategy for learning at Greystar. And a component part of that was around brand. What is it that we wanted to be known for? So when people interacted, when they had our services, what is it that we wanted them to think? So for me, very simply, it was around quality and it was around trust. So to know that anything that we provided, that we pushed out, they could trust that obviously it was right, the information was correct, and it was going to be a good user experience. So priority number one was to get some content, and I needed generic content at that point. So I peered around that very large door into the very large arena of vendors to try and find a content partner. And that partner that we landed with was Hemsey Fraser. And it ticked both the boxes in terms of that quality and the trust. So we partnered really closely and still do to this day for their content. And the reason why that really resonated as a partnership is because they really understood the journey that we were about to undertake and wanted to be a part of that journey. So nailing the content, having, great leadership and management content, personal and professional, ticked that box very firmly. But what I really needed after that is a way to deploy it. How can we deliver this content to our population? So as part of that vision, which kind of started around creating the Graystar version of YouTube, that bite-sized learning when people need it, created this phrase that I'm sure we hear frequently, which is around creating the right content that's available to the right people at point of need. And I needed a platform that could do that. But more importantly, it had to be simple. It had to be elegant, it had to be simple, and it needed to be something that could be implemented really simply without having to train people how to use it. So when we go back to that slide, that stat around, are we using our learning technology to the best of its ability? I needed something that could just work. And that's where the connection and where the relationship with 5app came. So we leverage their platform. So we launched to the background of a huge pomp and circumstance in April 2019. We launched that across UK and our European locations. And the business school, as we branded it internally, had 900 pieces of content, which was all Hemsley Fraser content. And we pushed that out in the various playlists. And the launch went brilliantly. There was not one single technical issue, and engagement went through the roof. And it stayed there for 3 months. And then it absolutely fell off a cliff. So as much as it sounded like a Disney story, it really wasn't, because after those 3 months, the user engagement disappeared. So this was a real learning point, for me, of which there were many, which is actually creating a learning platform and implementing it is actually the easy bit. Creating stickiness and ongoing engagement and impact is the challenge. So as we travel along the timeline, as we look at it, we've got a light bulb moment here. And because we've got this engagement falling off a cliff, the other learning that I took, and the development point for me as a leader, is my mindset when I was creating the business school was quite rigid in terms of it being a corporate, structured learning environment. And perhaps in hindsight, I didn't read the demographic. I didn't read my organization well enough, because the light bulb moment came when I was in conversation with various partners that we were working with, that actually the platform that we had could be so much more in terms of presenting communication, engagement, well-being, DEI. It just took on this different view. So I started looking at it through a different lens. And this was at the time, it was about June, I think 2019. And in the UK, we were swapping out our Prime Minister, and Boris Johnson, you may be familiar with, took office. And if you are familiar with Boris, you'll also be aware that there's a plethora of comedic video clips of Boris. And what we did to mark the occasion of the changing Prime Minister, we took one of these comedic clips and we loaded it into the platform. But what we did, and this was the step change, we then started to link and underpin all the relevant learning. So for that particular example, it was leaders and managing in transition, influencing, assertiveness, how to focus within 100 days of a new role. Any applicable learning we put against that piece of news. And what we saw was a slow uptick in terms of engagement. And this is where the importance of data analytics really kicks in, because we started then getting real insight in terms of how people not only engaging, but what they were engaging with, what content was being consumed rapidly, what content wasn't, what was being disregarded. The other thing that we noticed is that people then started filtering out through the platform and looking at the other various pieces of learning. So the culture that I was looking to drive and create was a self-directed learning culture, and this was just the embryo, if you like, of that starting to emerge. You know, people were now gravitating and self-serving. And then as we travel along the timeline, and this may be something that people remember, it was just like a small blip on the horizon, but COVID landed. And this was obviously huge, you know, and organizations were having to demonstrate agility. They were having to pivot at pace. So for us, there was an element of serendipity for our learning platform, because it played ironically really to our strength, because we were starting to post content around real world events. You know, what was coming out in the news, we were then underpinning with the various pieces of content. For COVID, what we ended up doing is having those live feeds for information. So people are now gravitating towards this learning platform, this place for communication, for our updates. We then started pivoting and curating content around recipes, you know, what to make with minimal ingredients within 10-15 minutes. What are the top 10 things to watch on Netflix? So it really started taking on a different life of its own. Of course, as we got further into lockdown, the whole well-being topic really started to bubble to the top. And this is where we started to see that whole sense of community emerging, and people supporting and posting and so on and so forth. So that aside, for us as a learning team, we then really started to pivot in terms of creating our own internal content. So recognizing our starting point was using external content through Hemsley Fraser, but Greystar as an organization, from a knowledge and from a technical perspective, it's quite niche. It's not necessarily the kind of content that you can go out to the marketplace and buy. So there's a real opportunity for us to start creating our own content, and that's exactly what we did. So we started leveraging some AI technology in terms of transcription, voice over technology to speed up that process. But more importantly, we started really engaging with our business, with those subject matter experts, with those superstars that you kind of just want to put you know, you want to bottle their knowledge. And we started plugging them in and downloading and then creating the content. But we got so good at it that we were creating content rapidly, that we went from 900 pieces of content in the platform to over 2,000. Okay, so all of this is sounding great, and we're back on the Disney story. However, you know, we've got the next blip coming up where we're posting so much content. I started to see a fall off in terms of that engagement. This was a good crossroads. So I reached out to the population, our customers, a sense check, bit of a post-implementation review, if you like. How are you finding the platform? What's resonating? What's not? And this is where this whole concept of noise really started to come to the fore with me. And when I was reflecting on that and thinking around what we're talking about here, I thought back to all the component parts that contributed to noise at that point. And I've just jotted them down. I'm just going to read them out because I think they resonate right now. So What I pulled out at that time was we were in a rapidly changing, evolving environment. There was new policies and procedures coming out that had to be communicated, revolving town halls, comms, engagement coming out from the centre, technology updates or the various platforms that we used. Of course, our daily emails, we're pivoting to Teams. So now we've got Teams channels and team chats going on, WhatsApp groups, new initiatives, projects, deadlines, volume of work that only increases, but bizarrely never reduces, never-ending meetings, multiple platforms and applications to navigate around, passwords to remember, changing priorities. And if you're an international company like Greystar, you've got different languages and different cultures. All of that combined, that's a huge amount of noise. And I think that's not just Greystar, that's most organizations. Now, let's just pause for a moment and recognize that we now need to overlay our world on top of that. We now need to overlay learning and development. So we're pushing our great new content that we're right now creating rapidly because we've got AI to support us with that. So we've got loads of content and we want to push that. We've got leadership programs that we want people to sign up to. We've got mentoring programs that we want to get traction on, and it goes on and on and on. So the point here, this was the crossroads where our learning academies suddenly came to life, because we needed a way to start navigating that. Because as much as we were creating this great learning brand, this great proposition, and we were getting traction, actually my biggest competitor was people's time. So how do I cut through all of that to make sure that people are getting the right skills and training that they need to be the best that they can be to propel the organization forward? So going back to the COVID piece, there was a number of business challenges that I was presented with, and we were working very closely with our operations part of the business, very large part of the business, but a huge advocate for what we were doing. The piece here is the strength of leadership that we had in operations. So Johnny Langton is still there, an incredible leader and a big people advocate. But he came to me and basically said throughout COVID, they continue to hire and hire at pace. But the challenge is, how do we upskill them in the flow of work? How do we increase that level of competence and capability, i.e. the skills, knowledge, and technical element at pace? And how, for this particular part of the business, how do we leverage the visibility and usability of the standard operating procedures? So there's a number of challenges there that contributed to the creation of this learning architecture, and those were the measures that we used. So I'll come back to the learning academies in earnest in just a moment. But to continue that journey, we launched those learning academies. We additionally created an onboarding academy in the style of an interactive book that had everything to support a new joiner into the organization at their fingertips, from HR policies to our values, our beliefs, our pillars, our senior leaders, videos welcoming people. How does the organization make money, and what do the different functions do? And a lot of this was all video media, because we'd made it so simple for that to be created. Because of the success of the Operations Academy, we then had marketing, we had development, we had investment knocking at the door saying, we'd like this academy for our functions. And then just winding right the way to the end, we've got Greystar Nexus is an internal talent platform that we built, because we suddenly got to the point where we could now start thinking about how do we identify our talent, and that's a conversation for another time. But going back to my earlier point around learning culture, and there's no three bullet points on how to nail it. We've got a timeline here and an evolution of how we created that self-directed learning culture and the various steps along the way to achieve that. So if I could kindly ask that we move on to the next slide. And this slide is, and don't panic, I'm not going to go through all of this. It's literally a summary to recognize the key challenges that were presented at each point, but through those various initiatives, the outcomes that we then realized. So you can see going for literally from zero to hero. But as much as I keep going on about this great story, there were so many key learning points and crossroads and decisions that had to be made. But for me, the key pull out here is really going back to basics, which is understanding who your customer is, understanding who your learner is. How do they learn? How do they want to learn? What do they need to learn? And creating a way that they can get that at speed, at point of need.
Yeah.
So if we can kindly jump into the next slide.
And as you're talking about the academy, Steve, we did have a question that came in that said, are these
Sure.
academies all on-demand self-directed learning? Are they inclusive of mandatory compliance training, or does that sit separately? So just let you know that it's top of mind for some in the audience.
Yeah, great. And thanks for the question. In terms of the compliance piece, we built that in. So from our onboarding academy, which we branded Compass, that was populated with all of that initial compliance training. With the functional academies that I just explained now, the various compliance training for each role or area or function was populated within that academy. So it was all encompassing. And the driver here is packaging everything that the employee needs, that the team member needs within one place. Okay, so it's that speed, that simplicity, that people have what they need within a couple of clicks. So the image that we have here, the framework that we have, we've got functional academies along the bottom, and we've got the skills, knowledge, and technical components. So the reason why we focus on this, and we take finance as an example. So if you're an accountant within finance, what your specific development pathway within your academy will give you is all the skills, knowledge, and technical content and training that you need to be the best you that you can be, to be the best accountant that you can be. And that's your development pathway. And it's functionally specific. When we then look above that, where we've got leadership, DEI, well-being, onboarding, this is purely an example. And it's also, limitless in terms of what these academies can be. But these are holistic. So irrespective where you sit in the organization, if you're a leader, you're going to need leadership development. It also enables people to collaborate from other parts of the business. So you've got that that breadth and diversity of thought and learning sharing. Same for DI, same for wellbeing, same for onboarding, purely as an example. So that is basically the structure of the academies as is. And again, if we could just drop into the next slide. This is the aesthetic, if you like. And what was really interesting for us as we went through this, the operations academy that we built took us 6 months with three members of the team. When we built the marketing academy, we halved that. And then when we built the development academy, we halved it again. So we really learned, very quickly how to automate the various processes that go into building these academies. And there's a couple of points that I'd just bring out here, which is going back to the operations academy. When we built it and we launched it, it wasn't L&D that launched it. It was the business. they fronted it, they communicated it, and they had the ongoing engagement around it. And what was really interesting is that they took absolute ownership of it from a content perspective, from reinforcing the message, and of course us as the learning function, we just housed that, and we were the catalyst to help drive and support. What was also really interesting when we started working with marketing, with development functions, they wanted it to look different. They wanted a different aesthetic. They wanted different language. The architecture was exactly the same. But again, as part of that learning, building in that flexibility, that customization to be able to personalize was so critically important. So how do we actually approach it? What's the blueprint on how you do this? Well, the Operations Academy was very manual, as the first one that we did, but it was around identifying those subject matter experts, really drilling down to the individual role and the requirements of each individual role. So recognizing we've got a whole diverse range of roles, maintenance, housekeeping, up to senior leaders in the operations side of the business. Their skills, knowledge, and technical the pathways were going to look different. It was important that we could differentiate. So we did a matrix activity, and then the most important part for us is that we then mapped the content. And it wasn't just a case of mapping that skills content in the business school. What we did, we looked across the organization for all relevant content in SharePoints, in various, other houses where, those functions have them in their files, really opening up that collaboration to identify all the relevant and appropriate learning, so we could then bring it into one space. So we can jump onto the next slide. Very kind. And this is the output that we had. So if you want to be a little bit cynical, where we were talking about vanity metrics on your left-hand side, there's the vanity. But that's why I make the point in terms of relevancy, depending on organization and learning maturity. So we're building a learning function. So demonstrating to my exco that actually people are using it and that they're engaging with it. Actually, that's a really impactful data point to report back, but it's not a standalone. What really started to stand out for us and the business was the shift in terms of the improvement of knowledge retention, the uplift in technical capability, and the demonstrable skills. So this data was collected from a pilot group of 100 people with a pre-assessment 6 months before launch, and then 6 months post. And then you've got your knock on and you feed into the NPS uptick as well. So amazing stats, amazing figures. There is science behind it, and this was the springboard for us as an organization that really answered that question in terms of cutting through that noise, delivering the content to the right people at the right time, but also demonstrating that actually you can really align very closely a learning approach and a learning proposition to the needs of the business. And on this particular scenario, that's where we got to. So again, if we could spin over to the next slide. So where does that bring us now? Well, what we've effectively done is we've productionized effectively six years of learning, six years of evolution and development. So it's not a case of saying, this is the magic pill. It's not, but there is a product here that or is a solution on so many levels, whether that be a platform challenge, content, personalization, personalizing the learner experience, driving and increasing that learner engagement. or very simply, how do you sell it into your business? So, what we've done as 5app is we've taken that, we've productized it, overlaid it with the very simple 5app technology, but it's there as a product, for people to leverage. So if we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. And if we can go on to the slide after that, I think is that our closing slide. That's our summary. So just the last piece from me is thanks for taking the time to jump on and listening to the case study and the journey and where we are now. I'd be really keen if anybody's got any additional questions or want to continue the conversation, please do reach out on LinkedIn, or drop me an email. If you want to know about more about 5app and the amazing stuff that we're doing in that space, then jump into the website as well. Happy to take questions, but please do reach out and let's continue the conversation. Thank you.
Steve, thanks so much for sharing all of that with us. I think we've had some great conversation going on in the chat. For those that are wondering, these 5 kind of key points, you'll get this obviously in the handout that comes via email in just a little bit. If there are no other questions for Steve or myself, we will thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And keep an eye out because from Brandon Hall Group, we offer at least one of these webinars every week. Most weeks it's 2 or 3. So on a variety of topics. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And we will give you back your day. And Steve, go grab some supper.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, team. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.